may be repressive in the case of African liberation that we often deal with here. So family, just keep that in mind. Take some time out and giving everybody time to get their recording devices or pens and paper, or just take time to turn the radio up so you can tune in a little bit closer and have our special guests have our undivided attention. So I'd like to get to it. We're dealing with the issue in Southern Cameroons, which is not getting enough attention on any form of media. And we're trying to do our best to make sure that the community who is listening to us, our loyal listeners, and those who are just tuning in, get information here on What Good Is the Song, the Friday Night Drum, so that they can be tuned in and they can have their human rights caps on and be active as much as possible in supporting those Africans who are not getting enough of our support. And so, family, we have our special guest, Dr. Chebe, as well as another guest that we have in the studio who, along with him in the fight for liberation and human rights in Southern Cameroons, what is also called Ambazonia, Dr. Asana. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So welcome to What Good Is the Song, the Friday Night Drum.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lumumba.
So let's get straight to it, because if, as I mentioned before, if anyone were to just look up Cameroon right now, the first thing that they would see in their feed online is to do with the election that just happened. And we want to really get into that because a lot of the information is coming out about the election results that have been delayed and not knowing what's going to happen with opposition and things like that. And in a lot of ways, what we have been dealing with over the past year or so on this program in relation to the updates is being overshadowed by that information. The struggle of our brothers and sisters just to have a decent means of living and to have self-determination in Southern Cameroons. And so we want to deal with that issue of democracy, as it were, in Cameroon and in Africa, and then also deal with that issue as it relates to the self-determination of our people.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Lumumba. But I would like to set the record straight, first of all. Elections actually took place in the Republic of Cameroon. That is the French-speaking part of Cameroon, but not in Southern Cameroons, which is actually called Ambazonia. It is not something that concerns us directly. I'm talking of the elections in a foreign country because that's a foreign country to us now. Our own country is called Southern Cameroons, or you call it Ambazonia. So they had their elections, and the information we are hearing is that the results have to be announced after 2 weeks. But I say official results will be announced after 2 weeks. But we know that the opposition guy, one of the opposition leaders who contested in the elections, who is called Professor Maurice Kamto, actually declared himself as the winner. Except my comrade here has something to add on that. That's what we know as of now.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lumumba, for having us. So elections have taken place in what was formerly known as La République du Cameroun, French Cameroon, and Dr. Chebe is very correct. To those of us who are Southern Cameroonians, that's elections taking place in a foreign country. We wish them well. We're hopeful that if they elected someone who has progressive ideas, the separation would progress in a less destructive manner, because right now the occupational forces from La République du Cameroun were trying to subjugate the people of Ambazonia, a separate country, and forcing us to participate in their elections when it was very clear that we have restored our independence and we did not want to have any part to do with the elections that were taking place on October the 7th. And to just show you that even the administration of Cameroon recognizes that we're two countries, the president of La République du Cameroun, Paul Biya, campaigned in other parts of the country, but he never stepped foot in Southern Cameroon.
Absolutely.
The political leadership of all the political parties, none of them came to Southern Cameroons, because they know that not only is it illegal for them to go and try to campaign in that area, be mindful of what is going on right now. You'll be subjecting the people in that area to greater risk.
Thank you. I like the word you used it.
Yes.
It's illegal for them to come to Southern Cameroon to campaign for elections because it's a different country.
Apply for a visa or something.
Right.
Yeah, they need to.
Right.
Now let's stick with that, because there are going to be some listeners who are familiar with that reality, and some who are just tuning in, perhaps for the first time, to 89.3. That maybe they're used to listening to their news from other corporate media outlets that don't recognize that reality. And so this is the first time they're hearing this. Is like, what are you talking about? A new independent nation, or that's a foreign country? You know, it's Cameroon is Cameroon. What are you talking about? Southern Cameroons, what is that? Ambazonia, what is that? So
quite interesting.
So that's a reality that we deal with.
Absolutely,
and even for those Africans and those brothers and sisters who know about the reality, some of them reject it. Right. Because we've been dealing with that, and it's like, no, we don't support that because that's going to be another South Sudan. No, we don't support that. That's going to be another. That's somebody else, some foreigner's idea of what should be happening with Africa. So we don't accept it. We don't even acknowledge that. So let's sit with that for a little while and deal with that reality of what exactly is that and why is that.
That's very true, Mr. Lumumba. The truth in this is many people around the world don't know what's actually going on. There is a country which is called La République du Cameroun. That's the way they call it in French. But if you call it in English, it's the Republic of Cameroon, which used to be a French colony. I would say French colony, even though it was actually a mandated territory after the First World War, when the Germans were defeated. Unfortunately, we know how the history of our continent is. When the Germans were defeated in the First World War, there was this country called Cameroon, Cameroon with a K, which was a German colony. And the victors of the First World War, France and the United Kingdom, Great Britain, being one of the winners of that World War, decided to take all the colonies of Germany. Unfortunately, Cameroon, that happened to be one of the colonies, was taken from the Germans. Unfortunately, this former German colony was divided into two parts. One part was taken over by the British and another part taken by the French. Now, we who call ourselves Southern Cameroonians, those of us who call ourselves Ambazonian, used to be administered by the British, and we were called the Southern Cameroons. They also used to be a Northern Cameroon, which is today part of Nigeria. And the part that the French took over and administered is what we now call La République du Cameroun. That's French-speaking Cameroon. Now, these colonial powers, the British and the French, were mandated by then the League of Nations to administer these nations up till they have their independence. Now, when the League of Nations was taken over by the United Nations, there was the essence, it was like a must that the so-called colonial masters have to take these countries to independence. And for the records, the French-speaking Cameroon, I'm talking of La République du Cameroun, to show that this is a different country, they had their independence on January 1st, 1960. Now, Southern Cameroons, which is called Ambazonia, we had our independence on October 1st, 1961. A different year entirely. Unfortunately for us, during this period, our forefathers were manipulated. They were coerced by this, I call them, it might be so hard, but it's the truth, by these gangsters, by these criminals. I'm talking of the British and the French. I say so because everything they did was in their own interest. They forced our parents that you are going to have independence either by joining Nigeria, or you are going to have independence by joining the French-speaking part of Cameroon. Unfortunately, our parents, our grandparents decided to join the French-speaking Cameroon. But the deal was straightforward. We are joining you and we are going to become a country of two equal partners. Unknowing to our parents, from day one, the French, in conjunction with the government in Cameroon, they had a very devilish intention from day one to assimilate us. And they have done one thing after the other to do that. By 1972, the original constitution that brought us into the so-called union, I say so-called because it wasn't because it wasn't ratified by the United Nations. It was abrogated unilaterally. I'm saying so because there was a clause in the so-called Constitution of 1961 that brought together the French-speaking Cameroon and Ambazonia, let me call it Southern Cameroon, that the form of government, which was a federal government, should never be tampered with. But because these guys had the intention to assimilate Southern Cameroons, they forced a so-called referendum in 1972. And unknowing to our parents, I was just a year old, so I can't say with certainty, that in the elections, our people were asked to vote yes or we. We is the French word for yes. Whether they should now have a united country. I mean, it defies logic. It defies logic in the sense that those who voted to join this so-called union were supposed to be the ones, if there was supposed to even be an election, to be the only ones who should have taken that decision. But, you know, there is a time for everything, just as my scripture tells me. We have suffered for all these years, up to 2016, for 55 years. Our people, our parents, our leaders will go forward and say, look, people, let's solve this problem in an amicable way. There is a problem. The more we try to solve things in a peaceful and amicable way, the more brutal the French-speaking Cameroon are behaving, killing, destroying, and abusing our people. But a time has come when all of those things have to come to an end. And on October 1st, year 2017, Southern Cameroons, Ambazonia, decided to declare its own independence, to restore our independence. So that's why we call ourselves the new nation of Africa, Ambazonia. We have declared our independence. Unfortunately, the colonizer is still in our territory. So we are in the process of freeing ourselves. That's exactly what's happening now. Maybe my colleague here has something to say. I don't know.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Chebe. Let me take up from where you ended. The issue of La République du Cameroun serving as colonizers in Ambazonia, Southern Cameroons. I'd like to let our guest please note that there is often a school of thought that describes what's happening right now in Southern Cameroons as, oh, it's terrible. Those Africans are still fighting over language. Why would these Africans not fight over their indigenous languages? Why is French a colonially imposed language, or English, causing these Africans to fight? And isn't it too late? This is 2018. We ought to be talking about an African Union and Pan-Africanism. Why are we fighting? Why are we so beholden to ideas that are not out there to help us grow as a people? What many people may not know is that the people of Southern Cameroons happen to be amongst the fewest of African people anywhere in the world who have actually struggled to live out the Pan-Africanist ideology. In other words, we were part of Cameroon, the German Cameroon. We were ruled as part of Nigeria. We're part of the German Cameroon from, say, 1884 all the way through 1914.
Yes.
Then, by 1916, the British started ruling our own section as part of Nigeria, and we were part of Nigeria basically all the way to 1961. And And then in 1961, we became part of French Cameroon. So if you were to look at this objectively, we are a people in the wilderness. We are a people who have struggled to live with their brothers in the east, in the west, in the north, and in the south. But what has happened is that we have been taken advantage of. Every time we as an African people have tried to live the Pan-African dream to come together and create a united Africa on a co-equal basis, some people driven by different ideologies have decided that, oh, we can take advantage of these people because they have rich natural resources, they have fertile soils, they have manpower, they have an educational or an educated workforce. So what is happening right now in Cameroon, to put it in perspective, what is happening in that country, my dear brothers and sisters, is nothing short of saying this is black people acting towards other black people as if they were white colonial masters. French Cameroon treats those of us who are from the other side of the country as if we are subordinate, as if we are slaves.
Second class.
And nobody will willingly accept a second-class status for this long. We are a peaceful people. We never decided that we were going to rise up and break this union. We thought things would work out. But now what we've noticed after 50 years is that these guys have taken advantage of us. They have taken advantage of us, and language is really a very small part of the problem. It is the daily humiliations that we have to suffer.
Absolutely.
It is, if this was white people treating black people this way, the world would be up in arms. I can assure you that. If this was white people treating black people this way, they would say this is apartheid, like it was in South Africa. If this was white people treating black people this way, everybody will be out there saying, oh, let us march in front of the White House. Let us go to 10 Downing Street. Let us go out there and protest because these white people are not treating black people fairly. But when black people do that to other black people, sometimes we miss it. And so we are tired. Our bones, our bodies are tired. And our ancestors who fought for freedom are now calling on us, this generation, that we have to move the needle somewhere ahead. And so we decided to restore our independence, and by God, we're willing to defend it.
Aye, brother, my brother, what you're saying sounds so beautiful. It is so great. And when we return, we will discuss further. You mentioned some terms: Pan-Africanism, African unity, and our ancestors, common themes of African culture. Stay tuned, family. We'll be right back. Okay, so what are we going to do?
Just
Asana. Yeah.
I'll bring it back in.
Okay.
Just remind them because it's special that who we're interviewing.
Okay.
And then
Okay, got you.
and then after, eventually I do want to get to Kilimanjaro capitalist stuff that but we can get that to that later.
Okay.
Welcome back, family. This is WRFG Atlanta. You are tuned in to What Good is a Song, the Friday Night Drum. We're having a discussion with our special guests, Dr. Chebe and Dr. Asana from Southern Cameroons, also known as Ambazonia, dealing with the issue of African sovereignty and resistance, rebellion, revolution against modern-day colonization coming from the Republic de Cameroon, which many people who have been listening may have gotten some familiarity on that history now, and those who are just tuning in, stay tuned because we're dealing with something that you won't find information about in many other locations. I have my brother Tutmo Sankara here who wants to pose some questions on some issues that are going on in the fight for sovereignty, or to defend the sovereignty of Ambazonia.
Yes, absolutely. And peace and blessings. African family, is a great honor to have these comrades in the studio with us as Pan-Africanists. As I said, you hear my brother from the continent. We make the link from here in the diaspora to the continent through that form of Pan-Africanism. And in my study of what's happening in what I consider the country of Ambazonia, which is Kwaku and I, we just call it Ambazonia. You say, hey man, let me tell you about what's going on in Amazonia. Right. And we just go with it. Right. But what I want the family to know is that these comrades are carrying out a very intense struggle there. There's been great repression. Like the brother said, if this was happening somewhere else, if it was white on black, you would hear about it. But the police and the army have attacked Africans there in southern Cameroon. There's been massive repression and death. But not only that, there's been resistance and victorious resistance. Obviously, somebody's been studying their revolutionary manuals down there in southern Cameroon, because the resistance to what is happening has been very great. And I want the family to know that there's been great. I keep up with it, you know. I mean, and there's been very strategic moves. I mean, the police superintendent, you know, in Kumba, you know, knocked off, and you know, so there are strategic actions that are happening in regards to claiming that right to statehood, to independence, to African liberation. And so we sit here with our brothers. I mean, of course, Kwaku and I, being members of the World African Diaspora Union, and having that great care and concern for our people on the continent, wish to you brothers and our people in southern Cameroon, viva Victoria.
Viva. Thank you.
Stay strong.
Sure. Thank you.
Fight hard.
Thank you, bro.
Recover your resources. Protect your families, your women and your children.
Thank you.
Stay on the front line of liberation. Your family here recognizes that repression and that colonialism that's been continued there in that nation, and stand with you in that fight for liberation.
Thank you. In fact, I strongly believe that the French-speaking part of Cameroon, frankly, they are a proxy to France. Unfortunately. You see, southern Cameroon is so endowed with a lot of resources, natural resources. Is it crude oil? Is it cocoa? Is it coffee? Is it gold? Is it timber? Name them. And above all, human resources. Now, the colonial masters, France being the number one, they pretended that they left Africa, but they didn't leave. It was a tactical move, a tactical withdrawal, but they kept the mechanism to be able to tap into the resources of the continent. And southern Cameroon is one of those places with the resources. I strongly believe that if we did not have all these resources, we will not have this problem we have today. They would have said, well, yeah, because legally, ethically, morally, we have a right on what we are doing, and they do understand it. They know it. That is why they cannot debate it, even in parliament, for God's sake.
Right.
But they still want to have the stronger hold on our people. So they are using Yaoundé, they are using the French-speaking Cameroon as a way to keep extorting and reaping the resources of our people. Unfortunately, the way it has manifested itself is in what my comrade here said. Abuses, killing, putting us as second-class citizens, taking us as slaves. So it is actually colonialism, for no better way of putting it. That's exactly what is going on.
Absolutely. Slavery and colonialism.
Yeah.
Of course, in these colonial borders that we speak of, as you mentioned earlier, was the result of the Europeans, of course, the Berlin Conference, 1884, 1885, and of course, World War I and II, whereby which Germany was stripped of its colonies, Cameroon being one. So what we're seeing is the French, of course, as you said, keeping their neo-colonialists in place.
Absolutely.
Carrying out, you know, operations to destroy African people there on the ground so they can keep access to those resources. Because France is one of those countries that, you know, they're not like Germany. Germany, they, you know, they got great engineers. They know how to make stuff. If France does not have its African colonies, it's going down.
They have confessed it.
You know, they know that. So what is happening there in Ambazonia is very important, and the African world must get behind it. And of course, Kwaku came and brought me the information initially, and I have been researching it and looking at it and saying, wow, you know, the same way that we have gone through our own slavery, you know, and separation from the continent, we as revolutionary comrades still, you know, reach out to our brothers and sisters who are still facing repression. And of course, on the African continent is the homeland of African people. It is the center of our culture, and we recognize that. And so Cameroon being a Central African country, being there, having so much of Cameroon's culture reaches out to so much other parts of Africa. It's related to Nigeria, it's related to Central African Republic and then Chad. And when you study the culture of it, then you understand how important it is, even outside of those natural resources.
Absolutely.
So, as I said before, Viva Victoria to the comrades there. Keep fighting, and whatever you need from us, brother, we're here.
Thank you. Thank you.
So speaking of the resources, there's information going around that we've been looking at since this summer, really, that has really taken a hold online, and a lot of those people who don't really have vested interest in this and following this information have been sharing this about what's going on in Cameroon, what's going on in southern Cameroons, what's going on in Ambazonia, what the human rights crisis in Nigeria of people leaving, and the idea that all of this is a fight over resources backed by a foreign entity named Kilimanjaro Capital Limited, which is a Belizean company that's said to have roots and operating in Canada. And so people that I've talked to personally will say, hey, I know what's really going on there. These Africans are just fighting because they're being backed, they're financially backed by Kilimanjaro Capital, which operates throughout Africa openly to support and destabilize these countries, to create new nations that they can sign contracts with to get access to resources there. And so Kilimanjaro Capital Limited is supposed to have signed contracts and agreements with Southern Cameroon's leadership prior to the formation, they say, of Ambazonia, or the fight for Ambazonia over the past 2 years. And that's just to get access to those resources that you were just talking about. So we would love it, the African family that is really invested in this, would love it if we can clear the air so that there's no confusion about what's going on, because this is being used not to get people invested, but just to confuse people and to get them to be like, oh, I don't want to have anything to do with that. Just let them do what they're doing.
Okay. Well, so thank you for that question. The perception that what's happening right now in Ambazonia, southern Cameroons, is as a result of foreign influence. And once again, those gullible Africans who cannot think for themselves are being deceived by these Westerners. They're picking up arms. They're killing each other. Nobody really cares about Africa. Why can't you guys just get along? That could not be further from the truth. The reality of the matter is that while we understand that there are vulture or venture capitalists out there who make their money, their income, it's a capitalistic world. They make their income by profiting in places where no one else would like to venture. I'd like people to note that in the case of Ambazonia, the people formerly known as British Southern Cameroonians, this has absolutely nothing. It has nothing to do with these guys. In fact, to put it in plain language, if in the 1700s, British people who settled in North America could fight to break away from the British and create a new country on the basis of the fact that they believe that all men are created equal, even though while white men were fighting for that, they at the same time turned their eyes on black folk and did not look at black folk as human beings. But the very ideas that they were fighting for equality, for freedom against the British, and the arguments that they made it is laughable that they would think only white people are capable of understanding that. So what's happening in British Southern Cameroons or Ambazonia right now, we have a long history. This is what happened all over the continent. It's a struggle against the colonial masters, whether they are white or black, it doesn't matter. It's a struggle against imperialism. It's a struggle against someone trying to lord it over the other and treat the other as a second-class citizen. So let me put it to you this way. What would you do if right now you're sitting in your house and someone shows up and orders you to leave, speaks in a language you don't understand, and even before you know it, they set your entire neighborhood ablaze? Women and children were burnt alive in their homes. If you think what I'm saying is a lie, all you got to do is just go to Google. Go to Google and look it up. There are now satellite photos of villages that used to thrive with domesticated animals that our people had that have gone extinct because they burned villages. They killed a lot of these livestock. So we are fighting not because someone out there is trying to take our resources. In fact, for people trying to propagate that view, please note that we as Southern Cameroonians, we are just as human as anybody else. We make mistakes, we learn, and we have learned through our mistakes that we want to be in charge of our own destiny. We have learned that we are the people capable of driving our own ship, and we shall never, never again subjugate our future to anybody outside of our own territory. Whether you are a venture capitalist, we will fight as poor people and we will win. The Chinese did it, the Vietnamese did it, others have done it, and we will win. In fact, if anybody is doubting that Southern Cameroonians would emerge victorious, let me say this to you. We were part of Nigeria and we left.
In 1953.
The British were there and they left.
Right.
Now, the French were there. They pretended as if they were living, and what they simply did was white men in black skin. In other words, black men or white men in black faces is what replaced the colonial system. So now, neo-colonial system. So to our brothers and sisters in La République du Cameroun, to the African diaspora that's listening, there is something you can do. We don't want to just come here and talk and then you get fed with all this information and you ask yourself the question, at the end of the day, what should I do? Well, there's something you can do. You can actually call your senator, your Congress people, speak to your church leader, speak to your community organizer. We want to sensitize people, because right now, where Southern Cameroons is, and I'm going to use that word, where we are in Southern Cameroons is where Rwanda was in 1992. There's a genocide happening against my people.
Thank you.
They are being slaughtered. The world has turned its eyes and it's not watching. They're pretending as if they don't see what's happening. Let me just give you an example. In fact, today, elections took place in the United Nations. And the United Nations, by a vote of about 173 to about 190, voted that the representative from La République du Cameroun should be seated in the United Nations Human Rights Council.
For God's sake.
Now, you're voting to have a country that has blood in its hands.
Currently.
You're voting for a country that is decimated, that is slaughtering its own people like flies. And you have all these countries that are acting as if they do not know. Well, we have adequate information out there for those who care. For instance, the United States House of Representatives held some hearings about the issue in Southern Cameroons. In the British Parliament, in the House of Commons, there have been hearings about this. We now have in Germany, in fact, this week in Germany, the German representative brought up this issue. We now have more than 20 senators and Congress people in the United States who have written letters on this issue. So maybe if you're a listener out there and you're wondering, what can I do to help my brothers and sisters in Southern Cameroons who have been through so much? They have been colonized, subjugated, and treated almost like slaves. What can I do? If you're asking yourself that question, please do us a favor. If you live in Georgia, call Congressman Johnny Isaacson and call the other Congressman, is it Chambliss?
No,
Chambliss is retired.
Dr. Perdue.
Perdue, right.
Senator Perdue.
Senator Perdue. Call your senators, call your Congress people, and let them go out there and make a statement. Let them call for the United States State Department to issue a statement calling on the government of Cameroon to actually go to the negotiation table and resolve this issue. Now, many people, many leaders out there have said, can't you guys just go sit on the dialogue table and resolve this issue? But put yourself in the position of French Cameroon. If you are extracting resources for free from some people,
and you are the master,
right? If you are the king, so you're the lord.
No reason to
you're ruling over some people, and someone just says, "Go to a meeting and then give them their rights and yield authority to them." Historically, that is crazy. That has never happened.
The oppressor never gives you the right.
Right. So
you have to take it.
We're calling on countries like the United States, Great Britain, France, and I don't want to say we're calling only on Western countries. If you are from Africa, please call on the African Union ambassador in Washington. Call on the chair of the African Union, President Paul Kagame. Call on the president of Ghana, the president of South Africa. Call on anybody you can call if you have access to these people in Africa. Because again, history is repeating itself. In '94, many people claimed what happened in Rwanda, they were unaware. Well, in 2018, you cannot say you never had access to information because the information is there. My people are dying and the world cannot be silent.
Yes.
Let me just add this, Mr. Lumumba. A few days ago, nobody could have said it better than Professor P.L.O. Lumumba. He was here. He had a big talk in Norcross, where he said, Ambazonians are people who are just trying to get back their dignity. Those who think we are out there, maybe we are causing noise, just go online and find out what is happening. Nobody wants to be subjected by others. And we have done everything to make sure this thing is resolved in a very peaceful way. It is French-speaking Cameroon that declared war on Ambazonia. So we are defending ourselves. We have never been the aggressors. So we are just trying to defend ourselves, our people, our children, our wives, our sisters. That is what is going on. Unfortunately, more than 150 different villages have been burnt down completely. That's exactly what is going on. This is not an exaggeration when we say this is the beginning of genocide in southern Cameroon. Just today, tens of people were killed in Ambazonia.
Wow.
Yes, family. We've been having this discussion with Dr. Chebe and Dr. Asana. I'm sorry. Switching those consonants. Asana, Dr. Asana and Dr. Chebe. And we want to make sure that we have all of our listeners invested in movements and information that is relevant to our people. And hopefully we've been doing that and we're going to continue to do that now. But before we go into another break and come back to conclude our discussion, I wanted to just echo what it seems like I've been echoing it every week in regard to the United Nations. We're talking about the Declaration of the Negro Peoples of the World and the fact that when it was the League of Nations, Marcus Garvey and the UNIACL issued this declaration and said, be it, quote, be it further resolved that we as a race of people declare the League of Nations null and void as far as the Negro is concerned, and that it seeks to deprive Negroes of their liberty, end quote. And what you were talking about with the vote of the United Nations General Assembly, overwhelmingly to put
an oppressor, somebody who has colonized a different set of people, somebody who has abused a different set of people for more than 57 years. I mean, it's laughable.
Yeah, and we have to eventually determine our own destiny and our own mechanisms of defending our liberty if the United Nations is not going to do that. And so we're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned, family, as we conclude our discussion on the liberation of Ambazonia and the defense of that sovereignty. Stay tuned, stay tuned, stay tuned. Welcome back to What Good Is a Song, the Friday Night Drum. We have been dealing with liberation as usual, but today we're dealing with it for our brothers and sisters who are fighting for the liberation and defense of their sovereignty in Ambazonia, also known as Southern Cameroons. We have our guest, Dr. Chebe, who is a regular on the updates coming from Ambazonia, and also his partner, Dr. Asana, coming to give us information that you won't find in many other places, especially on terrestrial radio. So welcome back, family. If you're just tuning in, make sure that you stay tuned to What Good Is a Song, the Friday Night Drum, and make sure that you tune in with us as much as possible at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time so that you can get all of this information and share it with family and friends. So I'd like to welcome our guests to give any final thoughts that you may have